We're a firm of architects based in central London. Our work is generally varied, and it's, I think, in the main in the UK, some of it in Europe, and some of it further afield. How are we differentiated from other offices? That might be in the way we approach projects, and that tends to be mostly driven from the common programs in a lot of projects, international or whether they're in London, and trying to differentiate those. So what we might do is tend to perhaps allow a project to have a number of parallel streams, so very programmatically driven, but ultimately how those layouts, those programmatic layouts, might be influenced then by something a bit more specific, whether that's within the lines of what the client is expecting. He doesn't quite know, he or she doesn't quite know what's also lying within the brief, or something that's very local, specifically local, that can also influence the design. But ultimately the DNA of the practice is architectonic, and that's, I would almost churlishly describe that as lazy architecture. If you can make your architecture by drawing as fewer lines as possible, it's hard work, then it tends to translate into an easier building to draw and make, and for me anyway, more attractive to experience in the making as well as looking at and experiencing finally. So expanding on that second question, how do we approach projects? So those parallel streams might be, yes, the very pragmatic layout, programmatic layout of a particular brief. But at the same time, if we had to characterize what we do, we might call it explore, restore, and ignore. And exploration is pretty much what all architects do. So that might be literally the physical context, environmental context. All of us have to do that. But also sort of historical and social context. And sometimes those can influence the materials you use, the definition and layouts of those spaces. That's exploration. Restoration is deciding how much of that context that you discover you might want to restore in some way, because it helps better define or bring back to life something that is lost in that context, as well as physically an existing building or adjacent to an existing building, literally some restoration, some physical restoration. Ignore is deciding that sometimes you can ignore context, you can be completely new as if you're tabula rasa, but also actually ignoring it in a more seductive way, suggesting that a counterpoint to some context. Yeah. So although if we say ignore, it's sort of deliberately turning your head in another direction, and just because you are turning in another direction, you're then looking at why it's turned in the other direction, and then taking account of the other context, as it were. It's difficult to. I'm reluctant to suggest that our workspace is so much more special or different from other architects. I think on the whole, architects find themselves in spaces that are a bit more brutal, because they tend to be cheap, and they're willing to accept them because also they're architectonic. So those found spaces I think are quite common for architects. Here, it's a new building, however, it's making use of an old building as well. So part of the envelope, 50% of our envelope is the old building, and 50% is new. What have we done with it? Certainly we've left the old completely revealed, as if it has just been demolished and cleaned. And then the other parts, the new interventions, are almost expressions because the people who work in the office teach, so we bring students here. And they are almost teaching tools in that bits of structure are bolted or suspended, and the meeting box we're in is sitting on top of a piece of suspended structure that is held up by one steel rod. Yeah, so if you look carefully, that one steel rod is holding up a steel beam, is holding up the bridge, the access bridge, is holding up the staircase and holding up this meeting box. So they are, yes, I suppose, perhaps structurally showing off structural gymnastics for our pleasure and teaching our students and perhaps our clients.